We now come on to the general debate on the International Investment Summit. I call the Minister to move.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm delighted to open the debate on the Government's inaugural International Investment Summit, which we hosted at the Guildhall in London on Monday. Leaders of the world's biggest companies, from Alphabet to BlackRock to Goldman Sachs to Novo Nordisk, came from all corners of the globe to meet with government ministers and to listen to what our new government has to say. Our message at the summit was clear. The UK is open for business once again. We have turned the page on stagnation and instability of the previous government, and in just over 100 days, this government has put growth front and centre of our agenda, reassured investors that we will create the very best conditions for them to invest and grow their businesses, restoring economic stability and confidence that businesses have been crying out for too long. As the Prime Minister and the Chancellor made clear, as well as all those higher profile investors who spoke at the summit, esteemed business figures such as Larry Fink, Eric Schwartz, Ruth Porritt and more, the UK has enormous amount to offer. We made clear our commitment to growth. We have restored economic stability, giving businesses the confidence they need for the long term, safe in the knowledge that the UK at last has a government whose central mission is to grow the economy and stimulate private investment, ending the chaos and churn of the last 14 years. And as both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor have set out, increasing investment into the UK is the government's #1 priority to drive growth. Our mission-driven approach is allowing us to think in terms of years, not weeks, and commit to the hard yards required to break down the silos that too often in the past have prevented effective government and have got in the way of real growth-driving change. Ambitious policy making for the long term, Madam Deputy Speaker, not sticking plaster politics. As the Chancellor said earlier this week, if growth is the challenge, investment is the solution. I'm delighted to say that as a result of the stability dividend that this government has introduced, we announced a record-breaking level of investment, more than any previous summit, of £63 billion of shovel-ready investments across the country, more than double the total from last year's summit, from global companies like Eli Lilly, ServiceNow, I will in a minute, Holtec, and many others. I will give way to the honourable gentleman.
It's welcome to have such great investment coming to the UK. Could you tell us the proportion that came in play before the election?
The announcements that were made from agreements that came into the lead up to the summit and actually at the summit. And I'm glad that he can join in us in congratulating the new government on securing £63 billion of investment, of shovel-ready investments. And I say to him, under his government, I lost count of the number of prime ministers, chancellors, home secretaries, and I myself was working in the private sector at the time. And very often I heard from businesses who said they did not have the stability or even predictability of government policy making. I will not have a across-the-chamber discussion with the honourable gentleman. I'm sure he will make a contribution in the debate. We are determined as a government to increase the number of good, well-skilled jobs, embrace the opportunities of technology and innovation, and improve productivity across the country. At the International Investment Summit, we demonstrated that the UK has tremendous strengths. We have a dynamic, ambitious and globally connected economy that has long been at the forefront of global exploration, invention and innovation. We have a global language, central time zone and a renowned legal system. We have a high-spending consumer market that benefits from an open economy, trade deals with over 70 countries, world-class talent supported by our globally recognised higher education system with 4 of the world's top 10 universities. And one of my favourite moments of the summit, Madam Deputy Speaker, was a panel that was chaired by our fantastic Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport on the creative industries and sport. And I was delighted to have a photograph with Gareth Southgate that I could show my boys when I got home. However, it was good, thank you. But in all seriousness, Gareth Southgate talked about how the Premier League was just an idea from the offset and how that has been built and marketed and now is world leading and creates great investment into our economy. And I'm sure the whole House can support that sentiment, as the Shadow Minister is demonstrating from a sedentary position. That's the first time I've said that in a debate for some time. However, when we took over from the last government, we recognised that there were issues we needed to address to improve the UK's competitiveness. That's why we have already announced a series of steps to improve our business environment, such as driving through planning reform to get Britain building, removing the ban on onshore wind farms, giving the green light to key solar and data centre projects. We are undertaking a pensions investment review, which the Chancellor has asked me to lead, to harness the potential of our £2 trillion pension industry to unlock new capital for our innovative businesses, drive growth and also improve outcomes for future pensioners. We've launched Skills England to boost the nation's skills and fill job vacancies, bringing businesses together with trade unions, mayors, universities, businesses, colleges and training providers, and resetting our relationship with our closest partners in the European Union.
Will you put on that point?
I will.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Let me add my congratulations to the front bench for an extraordinary achievement in securing £63 billion worth of investment. That is a tremendous vote of confidence, not only in this government but in this country. She's right to say that a big part of that is the stability dividend, but I think she's also right to say that the reset of our relationship with our closest neighbours in Europe must also be a big source of appeal. Did she find that feedback at the Investment Summit?
Indeed I did, because business want the government to take a pragmatic, not an ideological approach to our relationships with our main trading partners, and that's exactly what our new government is doing. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm pleased to report that at this week's International Investment Summit that we are not resting on our laurels, far from it. On Sunday, the Business Secretary announced the launch of the Industrial Strategy Advisory Council, which will be chaired by Claire Barclay, the CEO of Microsoft UK, and he also announced our Modern Industrial Strategy Green Paper, setting out 8 growth-driving sectors: advanced manufacturing, clean energy industries, creative industries, defence, digital and technologies, financial services, life sciences, and professional and business services. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not about picking winners, but it's about building on the UK's unique strengths and untapped potential, enabling our already world-leading services and manufacturing industries to adapt and grow, and seizing opportunities to lead in new and emerging industries. At the summit, the Prime Minister set out the government's commitment to a pro-growth approach to competition and regulation, to create a dynamic business environment that will strengthen our foundations and help to deliver the growth mission and the industrial strategy. And as investors, Madam Deputy Speaker, made clear, investors have a choice as to where to invest. We must not rest on our laurels. We must make sure that we forge ahead with the policies we've already stated, because we need investors to make a positive choice to invest in our country. And as one speaker from the private sector said at the summit, we don't want them just to invest, we want them to place a big bet on investing in the UK. The Chancellor also confirmed 2 new innovative measures to ensure our public finance institutions can better catalyse billions of pounds in private investment. We turbocharged the UK Infrastructure Bank to become the National Wealth Fund, which will have £27.8 billion to catalyse investment that would not have otherwise taken place. And we've launched the British Business Bank's new Pathfinder British Growth Partnership, a vehicle to crowd in pension fund investment and other institutional investment into venture capital funds and innovative businesses. We have committed to bringing forward a tax roadmap long demanded by businesses across the economy at the budget, which will give businesses the certainty and predictability to plan for the future. And as the Chancellor has already made clear, we will cap the rate of corporation tax at 25% for the duration of this Parliament. Gone had the days when a government, the previous government, announced that the corporation tax would decrease, then announced that it would increase, and then the next fiscal statement, about 6 or 7, 8 months later, announced that they would reverse that decision. So we want to ensure that businesses have that predictability going forward. And we've also said that we will maintain our capital allowances offer with full expensing and also the £1 million annual investment allowance. We will also reform and turbocharge the Office for Investment to sit under a new joint Treasury DBT investment minister, founder and former CEO of Darktrace, Poppy Gustafsson. This is a clear demonstration of the government's commitment to better serving the needs of investors and breaking down the silos between departments, which have too often prevented transformative government policy. We are determined to drive the transformational investments the country so desperately needs to fulfil its economic potential. Measures like this, introduced in just over 100 days of this new government, show that this government isn't just about warm words, but that we mean business in every sense of the phrase. Madam Deputy Speaker, this week's summit was a major vote of confidence in the UK's economic future and this government's commitment to realising it. Yeah. The investments and partnerships forged at this summit will have lasting impacts, driving growth, innovation and sustainability for years to come. But it was not just a one-off event. It was a first milestone in our ongoing work to build a deep and meaningful partnership with business, drive economic growth and create good jobs for working people up and down this country in all levels of society. As we move forward, let us work together across this House to ensure that the benefits of these investments are felt by all of our citizens across every region of our great nation. And before I close, I just wanted to say that the particular highlight for me of the summit was the evening reception at St Paul's, at which His Royal Highness the King was present, and at which many of us present were delighted to hear Elton John, who had some very warm words to say about our new government, and said something like, oh, we've been in the doldrums for the last few years, but now we have a new government under the leadership of a new Prime Minister, and things are looking up. So, as the Chancellor made clear in her closing speech at the summit, since taking power, this government has put unlocking private investment at the heart of everything we do. And our investment summit demonstrated our commitment to growth and that the UK is once again open for business.
Yeah. The question is that this House has considered the International Investment Summit, and I call Shadow Minister Kevin Hollinrake. Yeah.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I first welcome her back to this place and also to her new place? And I can assure her I'm very happy to work with her to try and further the best interests of the United Kingdom. And I very much welcome what happened on Monday. 300 international investors coming to this country are very welcome. This country is clearly open for business. We are keen to make sure to help the government succeed because that's in all our interests. I speak as a former business person as well as member of this House and obviously a constituency MP. That's in the interests of everybody. I was also very pleased to hear the Prime Minister talk about cutting red tape and regulations, and that's something we would all welcome, although I've got some questions on that as we go through my remarks. But particularly in the area of planning and infrastructure, we know this is a bottleneck to our economy, so we welcome any changes they can successfully make in terms of accelerating some of these projects that are held up by those problems. We also welcome the work she's responsible for as Pensions Minister, I understand, in terms of the Mansion House Compact, Mansion House reforms, which could liberate around £75 billion of capital into our productive economy. That is something which is much needed. Only 4%, 3 or 4% of equities of that money is invested today in equities versus 50% a couple of decades ago. So that's very important. We continue with the reforms started by the previous government. All this, of course, all this positivity on Monday we are pleased to see, despite, I would say, some of the gloom and doom we've heard from the from the government benches in recent weeks. I think many people, it's good to hear those investors say now is the right time to invest in the UK. And you can see why, of course. You can see why. Not necessarily because of the Labour government. It's why? Because inflation is running at 2%, below 2%, when it was running 11% only 2 years ago. The fact we have only 4% unemployment in this country, the fact that the growth of our economy is growing as fast as any other economy in the G7. In fact, our deficit stands at 4.4%, higher than we'd like it to have been, to hand it over to her government, versus the over 10% that we ran in 2010. I know a constant refrain we get from the government benches that they inherited the worst economic situation in history. That simply is not the case. If she could, very happy to take intervention from her and anybody on those benches, if they can name one single metric that is worse today than it was in 2010, I'll be very happy to hear it. And the chair of the Select Committee is going to give me it.
The Honourable Gentleman for giving way. He's here with his characteristic generosity. The truth is that I think the IMF forecast growth for this year at about 0.5%. On average, families were about £1,200 worse off at this last election than they were in 2019. And of course, the national debt has doubled, more than doubled, since 2010 to £2.3 trillion. £2.3 trillion. Those three metrics, I would suggest, form not a good inheritance, but a bad one.
There's no doubt we've been through a difficult time given the COVID and cost of living crisis, which affected that, particularly on a service economy. But the reality is he will acknowledge the deficit back in 2010 was over 10%. Today, only 4.4%. In real terms, adjusted for inflation, that would be a difference of about £160 billion, the equivalent of the health budget. So that things are much better. Their inheritance is much better than the inheritance we got in 2010. I'm very happy to give word to the Shadow Minister.
I thank the Shadow Minister. He's being generous to a point. I would suggest to him kindly that in 2010, the last Labour government did not leave a £22 billion in year in the public finances in the way that the previous government bequeathed to our government.
Well, she's a very sensible person from both in the private sector and in politics. And I'm surprised she would mention that figure. £22 billion, £9 billion of which was created by her actions, her government's actions, lifting public sector pay without any commensurate productivity improvements. Scrapping the Rwanda scheme. It is fake news to say there's £22 billion back all. I'm afraid, and she absolutely knows it. No doubt, though, there are tough spending decisions to be made, tough choices to be made, which is why I think it was very disappointing that one of those tough choices they made was scrapping of the winter fuel allowance. Let's see what those choices will be as we're going forward. I'm happy to give way.
This is how you do it. You take intervention.
Grateful to him for giving way. Will he acknowledge that the cost of government borrowing is roughly double today, what this government has inherited, compared to 2010, in part as a direct result of his disastrous Liz Truss mini-budget?
Simply not true. If you look, just read the Bank of England, what they said about that time. All the numbers around that went back to normal within a month of that situation happening, that fiscal event. That's simply not true. You can choose your own opinions, but you cannot choose his own facts. Let's look at some facts now. Let's look at the facts. The £63 billion, which of course we welcome. Absolutely. But she and her government stands on a platform of honesty and transparency. Let's put some honesty and transparency around those numbers. The Amazon number of £8 billion was announced on the 20th of March this year. The Blackstone investment of £10 billion in a data centre was announced on the 23rd of April this year. £36 billion of the £63 billion that was announced prior to this investment summit, either announcements or initiated by things like auctions by the previous government. Only 20% of what was announced was not already in the pipeline before that investment summit. The reality is, much of this was already baked in. There's bound to be, of course, a lot of overlap as you see a new government come in, but let's have some transparency and some honesty around those numbers. I'd be happy to give word to you, Lily.
By the spring of this year, had already priced in the fact that they expected a large Labour victory, and that was what was giving businesses and the market so much confidence in the future stability of our economy. So will the Minister explain why that is?
I will come on to confidence in a second if I can. The reality is the UK has always been a good place to invest for foreign investors. For the last 3 years, the UK is number 3 in the world for foreign direct investments. The only countries ahead of us being the US and China. It was the Shadow Minister, the Minister, I do apologise. The Minister references, of course, the wonderful event and the Guildhall and some of our wonderful places where we can host this international events, which we support what they did in terms of showing the best of Britain to our international investors. And I was pleased but surprised perhaps to see Elton John actually entertain the audience this evening. I was much more expecting Taylor Swift. Was that ever on the agenda? There's obviously a very strong relationship between the two. But perhaps when I thought about it and I heard about the reversal of the DP World position on their investment, I thought, well, that's obvious why they've done that now, because obviously they've asked Elton and the Transport Secretary to join a duet of sorry seems to be the hardest word. It was interesting in the number 10 press release on this when it talked about a rogue operator. I wasn't sure whether it meant the minister or the company concerned, but then it was a number 10 press release that mentioned rogue operator. So I'm not quite sure where that all landed in the end, whether that was just a rogue comment by a minister. But when it comes to, of course, we welcome the investment and we absolutely will support any successes the government can achieve. But it's right, of course, as opposition that we challenge where challenge is due, and we have many concerns about some of the things she refers to. She's absolutely right to say stability is the key. Stability breeds confidence in investors, which breeds investment. And that's why we are particularly concerned about the fact that changes to business taxation, some have been floated some months ago and left hanging in the air for some months. We know this is affecting investment right now, particularly around capital gains tax, particularly around something that's very close to my heart, business relief, used to be called business property relief, which is the ability for private businesses and businesses listed on AIM to be able to pass on their assets to the next generation on inheritance without inheritance tax. And there is a number of different questions around that, whether that will be continued with. It's hugely important they do, because that would affect some of the fantastic family businesses in this country who generate around £200 billion of tax receipts every single year and employ nearly 14 million people. That business relief is there for a reason. It is not a tax loophole. It is there as an incentive for family businesses and intergenerational businesses to pass from one generation to the next. Similarly, with agricultural property relief. We're also concerned about their inability, unwillingness to confirm that we no rise to national insurance for employers. It's been described by both sides of this House as a jobs tax. That's exactly what it is. All this uncertainty around business taxation will mean a suspension of investment and a reduction in the amount of hiring, particularly in conjunction with the potential workplace changes they're making, something we'll debate in this House on Monday, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we have great concerns about, particularly some of the union powers that could take this country back to the 1970s. I know many of the people on the opposition benches will not remember the 1970s. I do, and it wasn't a good place to be. And in the same statement where the Prime Minister is talking about cutting of red tape, if you bring in the 28 new regulations, within the Employment Rights Bill as they are drafted at the moment, particularly for SMEs, that will be very damaging for growth, very damaging for investment and very damaging for SMEs. But she doesn't need to take my word for that. If I can just read out some of the comments on some of the changes they are thinking of making, which will damage investment. The Federation of Small Business said its members are viewing these measures coming down the line with trepidation. Tina McKenzie described them as clumsy, chaotic and poorly planned. She said there are only 65,000 fewer payroll jobs since Labour took power, and the new government is sending out troubling signals to businesses and investors. Her words, not mine. The Institute of Directors said that confidence is fizzling out, and their index in terms of the investor appetite has gone from plus 30% in June 2024 to minus 7% in October 2024 in 4 short months. The CBI say that 62% of employers say the UK is going to be a less attractive place to invest. EY says that 60% of asset managers, private equity clients, have asked them to start work on moving abroad. I'm happy to give way to him.
Thank you. My own friend agree that he is actually now guilty of talking down the entrepreneurial spirit and ability of UK companies to cope with an exciting new government.
Well, I'm very keen not to do that. This is my point. It's a gloom and doom from the opposition and brought to the government. Sorry, brought forward. I have to get over that. I have to stop doing that. Brought on by these changes that are very significant. These aren't my comments. These are the comments of sensible business representative organisations who represent their members, and we should listen to the voices of business in this context. Even one of their own supporters, Richard Walker of Iceland Foods, says that changes must happen slowly to avoid a disastrous impact. I realise these days I've got to get used to calling you the government, and I've also got used to being a backseat driver, but which is even more frustrating being a backseat driver when the learner driving the driving seat doesn't know the difference between the brake and the accelerator. So these are the key levers they have at their disposal, and stability being the key. Winston Churchill, this is the importance of this conversation. Winston Churchill once described private enterprise. He said, private enterprise, some people see private enterprise as a predatory tiger that needs to be shot. Some people see it as a cow that they can milk. Few people see what it really is, and that's a strong horse that pulls the whole cart. It is hugely important we get behind private enterprise in this country. It's hugely important we do get that stability of tax policy, of workplace policy and the employment relationship. It's hugely important we continue to level up this country, and I notice that the department has been renamed. The levelling up seems to have disappeared out of the departmental name, but that is still hugely important to all parts of this country, not least part of the country I represent. Hugely important we make sure we control energy costs. We know that is something that is a key concern to many businesses around the UK. A key concern that we get cut regulation and red tape for our larger companies. The area that I focused most on in my previous life within the government as business minister was focusing on SMEs. They are the backbone of our economy. The number one area they struggle with is access to finance. That's one area I'd really like to see the government take some different measures forward. Happy to give way.
On that point around finance, I was pleased to see that JP Morgan, who have a headquarters in my constituency, joined with other big banks in the world to back the push to invest in the UK ahead of the summit. Does he agree with JP Morgan and those banks that we should be optimistic about the future of the British economy following the election?
Well, I wouldn't say following the election, but generally we should be very positive about our economy. As I've set out earlier, some of the economic conditions that make it conducive to investment in the UK, and we should be proud of that situation. I welcome her comments of the initiative or the change of priorities in the British Business Bank in terms of the Pathfinder initiative. I would say that piece of work was started by my honourable friend here in terms of his time in the Treasury. Again, that will help to ease that flow of finance into our SMEs. Crucially, if I look at our with a kind of a mixture of sadness and joy are the Conservative Party manifesto, now redundant manifesto. There were some really positive ideas in there about easing finance for SMEs, things like regional mutual banks, which I think should be a real policy that her government should adopt. Things like the open finance, the smart data revolution for our economy, which could transform the opportunities of SME finance, making it much easier for SMEs to shop around. But the key thing I would reiterate to her and to her fellow ministers is make sure we have the stability, not just in terms of a word, but also the stability in things like business taxation, capital gains tax, things like business relief, no jobs tax. Yes to stability of business taxes, no to taking us back to the 1970s by giving unions more power, and no to gloom and doom. I absolutely agree with that, and yes to a positive and optimistic view of the UK's future in the world. Thank you.
Yeah. I call Jade Botterill to make her maiden speech.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the opportunity to deliver my maiden speech in this important debate on international investment, the benefits of which will be felt right across all regions of our country. Yeah. I want to begin by paying tribute to my predecessor, Mark Eastwood. He was a dedicated servant to his previous constituency of Dewsbury. On behalf of myself and our community, thank you. Being the member for the area I grew up in is truly the honour of my life. I will forever be grateful to the people across Ossett and Denby who put their faith in me to represent the area I proudly call home. I want to pay tribute to the Labour members across the constituency, especially stalwart member Robert Goslin, without whom I wouldn't be stood here today. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank my parents for their support, as well as my brother, who's always been there for me during some of the most challenging times. I'm delighted that they've travelled from Wakefield to be in the public gallery today. Yeah. Their own commitment to our community in their long careers of public service, working hard and talking straight are principles that I hope to emulate here. Madam Deputy Speaker, my mum is so committed to the North that this is her first ever trip to London. Wow. Proof, wherever needed, that us Northerners only come south if somebody makes us. Now, I know many members have already spoken about the beauty of their patches, but with respect, I must make the case for Ossett and Denby Dale. Driving from Ossett towards the Wakefield rural villages and into Denby Dale, the sky widens and the moors roll out before you. On that drive, when I see the Emily Moor mast appear from the horizon, built taller than the Eiffel Tower, I know I'm home. It's beautiful, it's Yorkshire, and it's the place that made me who I am today. But it's not just those moors and views that move me, it's also the people that call them home. We are people of talent, community, and as good Yorkshire folk say, hard graft. In fact, that beautiful landscape is the fruit of exactly that graft, of that talent. You see it in the pits dug across the countryside, which serve to fuel and heat our nation. You see it in the fields, ploughed, planted and grazed by countless generations to feed not just Yorkshire, but the rest of the country. You see it in the town markets, which have bustled with small traders, craftsmen, local farmers for generations. That landscape, not just the cradle of talent, but a product of it. Each town, each village, with its own community, its own culture, all quietly, proudly distinct. As well as hard work, these towns and villages are famous for their culture, their creativity and their heritage. Home to brass bands, Morris dancers, maypoles and even a Doctor Who. But most importantly of all, the world's greatest rugby league team, Wakefield Trinity. Labour may be a party of the Union, but in West Yorkshire, when it comes to rugby, we watch the proper stuff. And as Madam Deputy Speaker knows, that's league. We are also home to Yorkshire Sculpture Park, with its Barbara Hepworths and Henry Moores, and the National Coal Mining Museum, which roots us in our proud history. And I'm enthusiastic, sometimes maybe a little enthusiastic, that my constituency contains so many wonderful pubs and brewers. We've got the ever-expanding Ossett Brewery and our famous yearly festival, Ossett Beer Cart. And just as we work hard and play hard, we also pie hard. Indeed, for over 200 years, the people of Denby have marked special occasions in the only way I think to be appropriate, by baking enormous pies to feed thousands. pies even as long as 40 feet, with 9 tons of filling and 200 pints of bitter. That history and that culture must be championed. It's Yorkshire culture, it's our culture. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, I refuse to only talk about my community in the past tense, about opportunities we used to have and industries we used to lead. Indeed, I want my successes in this place to be celebrating the creativity and achievements of children being born in my constituency today. Sadly, however, the Social Mobility Commission recently reported that many young people in Ossett and Denby and other post-industrial communities across our nation face an uphill battle. Growing up in a rural town, I know that feeling all too well. That the place you are from is overlooked, forgotten even, and that opportunities are few and far between, and that the only path to success in life is leaving your family, your friends, your home. After briefly living in London in my 20s for work, I remember feeling like the token northerner with the funny accent. I find myself having to speak eloquently so folks down here could actually understand me. The only problem with that was, when I got back home, my friends and family would ask me why I was speaking so posh. It actually made me feel quite lost. Young people in Ossett and Denby, in towns and villages across our country, should not feel like they have to get out to get ahead, and yet so many of them do. So to talk solely about what was once possible in our community is to betray those young people. Instead, our politics must be built on their dreams and on their potential. Decent, secure jobs with reliable public transport to get them there. Good, affordable housing where they can build their families and their future. High-quality education and skills training. Access to creativity and culture. Aspiration. Hope. So that when they see the sky widen and the moors roll out before them, with Emily Moore Mast standing tall on the horizon, young people should see somewhere that is ready to be remade once more by their talent, by their graft, by them. Madam Deputy Speaker, England is a nation of towns and villages like mine, of community, of culture, of graft. For England to succeed, towns and villages must succeed, and it will be my mission in this place to see that happen. Thank you.
I call the Liberal Democrat spokesperson Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. May I please welcome the Minister to her place and thank her for her support when she was not in this place, when I was further back on these benches as well, when we worked together on some of these issues. We Liberal Democrats want Britain to be one of the most attractive places in the world for business to invest. We want to see responsible, sustainable businesses investing in tackling the climate emergency, creating jobs, creating growth and creating wealth, some of which should go into investing into our health, education and public services. I want to welcome the fact that the government decided to hold an international investment summit within its first 100 days. I think it sends an excellent signal to the world that UK PLC is open for business, and we Liberal Democrats welcome and support that move. We welcome too the announcements about the revival of the industrial strategy and a new strategy for the British Business Bank, and we look forward to scrutinising those plans as a constructive opposition. But we also know that this government has to rebuild the economy, but also has to rebuild our reputation. I have to say it is of enormous relief to me that I think some of the dark days of the last government, I hope, are behind us. We had the tweeting diplomacy of two former Prime Ministers, which made us look like a small country on the international stage. We had the half-baked Brexit deal, which has wrapped up small businesses in red tape and reams of paperwork. We had the rolling back on net zero and the flip-flopping fiasco on HS2, which created uncertainty, scared off investors and put the jobs of the future at risk. And then we just had the sheer incompetence of a government that had forgotten how to negotiate. And as my party's former health spokesperson, talking to some of the pharmaceutical companies that were involved in the VPAS negotiations over the price for branded medicines, it became patently clear that many of these pharmaceutical companies were putting their investment abroad and not in this country. And that is investment that was lost on the Conservatives' watch. So whilst I do welcome many of the things that the Labour government have have proposed and are bringing forward, I do think there are some notable gaps, and it's on those gaps that I wish to focus today. Now, of course, we know that this debate today is about international investment, but I urge the government to think about local investment too. In this country, small businesses are the engine of growth. They are the backbone of our economy. They are the heartbeat of our communities. And they're really struggling to invest. And there's one major reason for that, and it's the broken business rate system. It is absurd, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is absolutely absurd that there are small bricks and mortar businesses on our high streets up and down the country that are seeing their business rates, or have seen their business rates, going up, whilst Amazon warehouses have their business rates going down. It is absurd, it is a disgrace, and I urge the Labour government in the strongest possible terms that the autumn budget this autumn should be the final budget of which business rates become a permanent feature. They should be scrapped, they should be replaced with a commercial landowner levy, and I urge the Labour government to act on that as soon as possible. To make it even worse, we know that in many parts of the country, our high streets are not in a good state, and there are small businesses that want to invest. They often want to invest in good environmental things. They want to invest in solar panels and insulation and ventilation and bike sheds, things that would be good for business to create a sense of community, to tackle the climate emergency and to improve the public realm. But if they invest in those things, their business rates can go up. This is nuts. It is absolutely nuts. This has to be the final budget where business rates are a permanent feature, and I urge all colleagues to get behind that call. The other thing I'll talk about are skills. The government has talked a lot about investing in infrastructure and housing and big things that we can build, but skills are so important. One quick example, in my constituency, we have a phenomenal organisation called Gem Cable Solutions. They are a leading defence and aerospace company. They make bespoke cables and fibre optics using precision manufacturing. Individual people making handmade cables that are flying things into space. It is extraordinary. But can they get the highly qualified engineers that they need in this country? No, they often can't, because we are competing on the international stage for some of the finest engineering talent. And at the same time, under the last government, they couldn't get that talent from abroad either. So I urge the government to bring forward a skills strategy as soon as possible, to consult with other parties and make sure that our small businesses can get those skills. My third point, Madam Deputy Speaker, is around the climate jobs of the future. Now, I know that the UK Infrastructure Bank has been rebranded as the Wealth Fund, and it has attracted £7.3 billion already in funds. I would be grateful if the Minister could confirm whether this new Wealth Fund will have an explicit remit to support the UK's transition to net zero carbon emissions. And finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, on Brexit. It is no secret at all that Brexit has wrapped up our small businesses in red tape, and they are dealing with reams of paperwork. We have to remove as many trade barriers to our small businesses as possible, and I urge the government to bring something forward on this front as soon as possible. Thank you.
Sarah Russell to make her maiden speech.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you all for allowing me this time to make my maiden speech. When I drive around Congleton constituency, I thank my lucky stars that I have the privilege of both living in and representing somewhere so very, very beautiful. It's made up of gorgeous rolling countryside and farmland and hedgerows, and there are oak trees. The farmers work all hours to produce the food that we need. It has views of the giant radio telescope at Jodrell Bank and natural beauty spot Bosley Cloud. It's Arcadia within commuting distance of Manchester, Crewe and Stoke, and I cannot tell you how much I truly love it. The constituency is a growing place, with around 5,000 extra houses in the last few years. The population is divided between the Cheshire market towns of Alsager, Sandbach and Congleton, alongside the larger village of Holmes Chapel and many beautiful smaller villages such as Road Heath, Church Lawton and Goosetree. There can be few more idyllic spots in the country than sitting outside the Swettenham Arms, next to the Lovell Arboretum, overlooking St. Peter's, the archetypal village church. Though each town and village has its own unique character and history, the joys and challenges experienced by the families who live there are often remarkably similar. These include families whose children have special educational needs and disabilities, and who often face extensive challenges getting the diagnoses and support that they need. These families need our help, and I will do everything I can to assist them. I've been pleased to hear the Prime Minister referring in this chamber repeatedly to these difficulties, and I'm confident that he will help us too. There are also families who will benefit from Labour's potential review of shared parental leave. 54,000 women a year lose their jobs when they are pregnant or on maternity leave. Women actually out-earn men in their 20s. The gender pay gap is in many respects actually a motherhood penalty. Men taking longer periods of paternity leave is a way that we could normalise parental leave and potentially reduce these problems, and I'd like to thank the government for starting the consultation on this imminently. I'd like to pay tribute to campaign groups such as Pregnant Then Screwed, Rights of Women, Dad Shift, Parenting Out Loud, and the TUC and trade unions, who are all doing incredible things in this field. There are also many homeowners in my constituency who have been affected by leasehold and fleecehold problems. They will welcome our planned reforms on these issues, and I intend to contribute to this. They also include older people, often the backbones of our community, who are providing childcare for grandchildren and often volunteering at the same time. But sometimes they're doing so in avoidable pain whilst on NHS waiting lists that are too long. These are just a few of the issues that I intend to apply myself to as MP for Congleton. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to take you now back into Congleton's history. Congleton itself is known as Bear Town. The reason for this is that there is a local story that in the 1600s the town saved up to buy a new Bible. Shortly after this, and before the summer fete, the local village bear died. So the townsfolk agreed that rather than buy their Bible, they would postpone the purchase and get a new bear with the money instead.
Very wise. Very wise.
Congleton is a very entrepreneurial place across the whole constituency, and many of our small businesses feature references to the bear. It's also in our local iconography everywhere. We have the Beartown Tap, Beartown Beer, and the bear features pretty much everywhere. As does our fantastic statue of Elizabeth Wollstonecraft Elmy, which was lobbied for and fundraised for by our local feminists. Elizabeth, who based herself in Congleton from 1874 until her death in 1918, played a significant role in the women's suffrage movement, founding the Women's Social and Political Union and campaigning for women's education and voting rights. I hope I shall be thinking of her often in this place. Another of our most famous local figures, although quite different, is Harry Styles, whose hometown of Holmes Chapel is now a point of pilgrimage for his fans. I'm sure everyone is sorry to hear today of the death of his former bandmate Liam Payne, and we would all want to extend our condolences to his friends and family. Local people have set up a walking trail associated with Harry Styles. If anyone fancies it, I would strongly recommend following it with a stop in any of our local independent businesses on Holmes Chapel High Street, and probably include a drink at the George and Dragon or the Bottle Bank, or both. Both publicans, I know, do a lot of voluntary work within our community. That's common in my constituency, and I know many of yours as well. Whether it's coaching football at Vale Juniors or many of the other community sports clubs, there are too many for me to list. Planting trees and conserving and maintaining our woodland and footpaths like the Sandbach Woodland and Wildlife Group and the similar group in Congleton, helping young people through uniformed groups such as Scouts, Guides and the various Air Cadets, of which some I've visited, running schemes to support men's mental health such as Goosetree Community Shed, Holmes Chapel Men in Sheds, or the new Sandbach Men Walking and Talking Group, or even a whole community energy power plant, our Congleton Hydro. We have the most amazing set of citizens. I'm so grateful to the fantastic contribution they made to help others, support those who need it, and truly make my constituency the fantastic place that it is. On the topic of contribution, I would like to pay tribute to my predecessor, Fiona Bruce. Congleton has had 3 MPs in its history, all of them women: Anne Winterton, Fiona Bruce, and now me. I know many Christians in the constituency and beyond appreciated Fiona Bruce's advocacy on behalf of the religious community, both in the UK and internationally, in her role as envoy for religious freedom. We have many active local church groups in our community, and they contribute a great deal and very varied set of support. Churches and secular volunteers and organisations, including food banks, food pantries and the sawmill, are all quietly providing much-needed food support within the community. They do this to a far larger number of adults and children than the apparent affluence of the area would superficially lead one to expect. As a discrimination lawyer and someone who went into politics because of the value I place on equality and inclusion, I will continue to advocate for the rights and freedoms of all of my constituents and to celebrate the diversity within our community. In this regard, I want to particularly mention the One World Festival in Ossett, which I attended recently. First established by Margaret Keeling 30 years ago, it celebrates the diversity of nationalities living within the Elsage community with food, activities and lots of performances from local school children. It really is a delight. Thank you, Margaret. Another one of the many achievements of the fantastic volunteers in my constituency is that we have regular Pride events. Congleton held its first Pride round about 5 years ago, and I must pay tribute to Richard Walton and Ronan Clayton and all those who were involved in setting it up. It's now, thank you. It's now ably chaired by Malcolm Pope, who is taking it from strength to strength. The excellent curator Anna Mallock put on a Pride exhibition in Congleton Museum, hosting photos from those early events and featuring art from the local LGBTQIA+ community. Since then, more Pride events have grown in Sandbach, Alsager, and for the first time this summer, Holmes Chapel. At one of these events, it was suggested to me that these are really just a family fun day, a village fete, if you will. And it's true that the events are fun, fabulous, and family friendly. But beyond the live music and bright clothing remains a serious message. The hard-working volunteers who make these Pride events happen do so in the face of repeated homophobic hate crimes. Similarly, for women, there's still a backdrop of fear attendant in many women's daily lives. Women in my constituency have written to me or spoken to me about their experiences of sexual violence. I'd like to say to the young women who talk to me, and you know who you are, I will be fighting for you and for all young people in this place every day. Yeah. That includes, in particular, by ensuring that as we embrace new technology and innovation, as we have done this week at the International Investment Summit, that we find new ways to protect people from new threats. Whether it's people looking at tractors in their workplace on their smartphones in this workplace, or AI baking in discriminatory decision-making, new technologies unfortunately also bring the new potential for harassment, discrimination and abuse, and we mustn't be caught off guard. We need to get on the front foot with this. My constituency has a long history of developing new technologies. The constituency boundary bisects the site of Jodrell Bank, the amazing radio telescope. Sandbach was the proud home of ERF and Foden's trucks, with the first Foden traction engine built in Sandbach in 1881, and that was later followed by production of heavy goods vehicles for 150 years. The history and heritage of Foden still runs through the blood of the town, with the annual Transport Festival and its incredible parade of vintage trucks, wagons, classic cars, and there's even the odd plane on the common. And of course, born out of the works in 1902, I have to mention that my constituency is home to one of the world's leading brass bands, Foden's Band, who have twice won and twice come runners-up in the National Brass Band Championships of Great Britain. I will work across this house to stand up for the incredible, entrepreneurial, community-minded people and businesses of the beautiful place that is Congleton constituency. And lastly, I'd like to say some thank yous. Thank you to the volunteers who helped me to get here and continue to support me. I am very grateful. That includes those from the Labour Party, and I also want to make a special mention of the Fabian Women's Mentoring Scheme. Finally, thank you to my adored family who are in the gallery today. When I'm in Westminster, I miss you so much. I hope I do all of you proud.
I call Peter Fortune.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And before I start, can I pay tribute to those members who made their maiden speeches today? The beautiful and emotional speech that we just heard from the member for Congleton. We can all feel that passion and emotion coming from her. And actually, she's given me an idea. When I'm out in Keston this weekend, I might recommend to some of the residents that we get ourselves a local village bear. Although I can hear my daughter recommending we get ourselves a local village Harry Styles. Probably that would be preferred. And also to the member for Ossett and Denby Dale, who spoke passionately about representing the place that she called home. The idea of Pie Hard is what I'm looking forward to. Perhaps a Bruce Willis remake on the rolling hills of Yorkshire would be enjoyable. I congratulate them both. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am going to continue being nice to the opposition because I for one, I'm impressed by the government. I've picked this up from my right honourable friend, I do apologise. I'm impressed with what's been achieved at the International Investment Summit. Within weeks of allegedly receiving the worst economic inheritance of any incoming government since the Second World War, Labour supposedly secured billions of pounds of investment. I mean, it is frankly unbelievable. And it's not because I doubt our country's ability to attract investment. Britain is a tremendous place to invest. We're a wealthy, free, fair and talented nation, a place where you can do business and thrive. That's why Britain's foreign direct investments stock grew by more than 2 trillion throughout successive Conservative governments. More than France, Germany and Italy combined. My scepticism comes from the idea that this government, which only appointed a Minister for Investment 4 days before the summit, secured every penny of this investment. As anyone in business will tell you, the devil is in the details. And a quick inspection will confirm that most of this investment was in progress thanks to the previous Conservative government. So let's look at clean energy, for example. Britain has secured much of the investment this government claims credit for thanks to a Conservative policy, contracts for difference. Without this market mechanism, where investors bid for a guaranteed price, we wouldn't have secured as much investment as cheaply for bill payers. It's why we have the world's 4 largest offshore wind farms off our coast. It's also why renewables generate 44% of our electricity today, compared to just 7% in 2010. And it's why the UK was able to close its last coal-fired power plant this year. Now that's a Conservative record, as much as Labour might envy it. So this government has done the easy bit, tally up the figures and take credit for someone else's work. Admittedly, that is a harder task when Number 10 is in such disarray, and the Minister only had 2 days to prepare for the summit. In fairness, only time will tell if this summit was a success. And when we see if relationships built leads to more investment, not only what was already on its way. But that's the hard bit. Because to secure more investment and compete globally, Britain needs to be light on regulation and low on taxes. Now, while the Prime Minister talks about removing needless regulation and being open for businesses, this government's actions say otherwise. Despite the explicit manifesto pledge, we will not increase national insurance, the Chancellor is currently drawing up plans to hike the tax for employers. And let's make no mistake, this would be a tax on jobs, making it more expensive for firms to hire, impacting big and small businesses alike. From Bombardier in Biggin Hill to pubs and cafes in Hayes, or to the Churchill Theatre in my constituency in Bromley and Biggin Hill. The tax hike may fall on employers, but working people will pay the price as job opportunities shrink and pay rises are limited. Businesses' hands will be tied further by what the government itself brands as the biggest increase in employment regulation in a generation. While the government plans to tax jobs and French-style union laws, another cabinet minister took a more explicit anti-business approach. The Transport Secretary's admitted that she's been boycotting a ferry company for 2.5 years and encouraging others to do the same. So while the Prime Minister glad-handed investors, promising less red tape, openness to business and careful only to mention tax just the once, his government is delivering exactly the opposite. And to finish up, Britain faces a more significant problem, and that's keeping up as technology advances. Leading on artificial intelligence, quantum, engineering, biology, or semiconductors is vital to our future prosperity and security. But we face considerable challenge in doing so. For example, in Britain, we are home to the largest number of foundational models and generative AI startups in Europe. Thanks to the compute power we need, we lack the compute power we need to build and run AI models. The previous Conservative government recognised this problem and planned to build a new supercomputer in Edinburgh, 50 times more powerful than our current top-end system. But Labour has now cancelled this £800 million investment. And this is yet another example of Labour's actions not matching its rhetoric. The government cannot be in favour of growth whilst cancelling investment. It cannot be cutting regulations whilst planning huge increases in red tape for employment. It cannot be supporting jobs while preparing to tax their creation. And it cannot claim to have the worst economic inheritance while copying and championing the Conservative predecessors' work. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, if the government doesn't get its story straight, investors will almost certainly stay away.
Callum Anderson to make his maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It is with deep humility that I rise for the first time in this House as the Member of Parliament for the new Buckingham and Bletchley constituency. I'm pleased to contribute to this debate. I would like to congratulate my honourable friends, the members for Ossett and Denby and Congleton, for excellent speeches. Their constituents are fortunate to have such formidable representatives. I should, of course, begin my remarks by paying tribute to my two direct predecessors. In Ian Stewart, this chamber had a calm, measured advocate for the former Milton Keynes South constituency, who, among many other things, consistently championed better transport connections for the city and the United Kingdom more broadly. I would also like to thank the now honourable member for Mid-Buckinghamshire, whose kindness and generosity I have valued as I've navigated these early months in Westminster. They follow in the footsteps of John Bercow, who served as the member for Buckingham for 22 years, and Dr Phyllis Starkey, who served as the last Labour Member of Parliament for Bletchley as part of Milton Keynes South for 13 years. All exemplify what it means to be a dedicated public servant, and I will do my utmost to meet their standard. Madam Deputy Speaker, while Buckingham and Bletchley is a new constituency for this Parliament, it is in fact a reunion of old friends. For nearly a century, these communities were connected as one, before, in 1983, Milton Keynes, alongside Bletchley, had the temerity to split away and flourish into the formidable modern city that it is today. And while the towns of Buckingham, Bletchley and Winslow themselves are different in character, all have deep-rooted, rich histories. Yet beyond those towns, many villages lie in between, which breathe life into the heart of our constituency. Be it Westbury or Quainton, Stukely or Nash, I could go on, all contribute to the fabric of our collective identity. And I must never forget Tatternoe and Milton Keynes as well. Each community, while unique, shares common values, a deep sense of civic pride, patriotism, and a belief that opportunity should be available to everyone if they work hard. To all of them, I pledge to serve with the same level of diligence, be they urban or rural, and regardless of their size or affluence. Madam Deputy Speaker, one of the great privileges of representing Bletchley is that I carry the legacy of Bletchley Park and the remarkable code breakers who worked there in the 1940s. The ingenuity and tireless efforts of those brave women and men, including Alan Turing, a very British hero, who together uncovered key strategic military plans of the Nazis, not only shortened the Second World War and saved countless lives, but laid the foundation of today's technological age. It's why Bletchley Park remains an iconic institution of national and global significance, and why it was such a fitting host for the AI Summit last year. But that legacy of technology and creative thinking remains at Bletchley's core today. As we speak, the South Central Institute of Technology is inspiring the next generation, providing young people with the skills to thrive in the digital age. And the expertise does not end there. The University of Buckingham is innovating in higher education, enabling students to pursue accelerated degrees, equipping them with the agility and knowledge to navigate an ever-changing world. And just as Bletchley and Buckingham lead in education, so too does Silverstone, of which the southern half of the track is located in my constituency, leads on the world stage for motorsport. It convenes the best drivers, including our very own Sir Lewis Hamilton and Lando Norris, alongside cutting-edge engineers, technologists and designers. Silverstone, Madam Deputy Speaker, is where the pinnacle of innovation meets the thrill of competition. And inward international investment has been pivotal to achieving this status. From Formula One teams to global technology giants, international investors are choosing Britain because they see a country where creativity, innovation and entrepreneurship can flourish. But the value of international investment is not just financial. It is very much a vote of confidence in us, our workforce, our infrastructure, and our unique creative spirit. It strengthens our relationships with key global players, ensuring that we continue to be the country that others seek out for collaboration, whether in emerging fields such as artificial intelligence or established ones like financial services or advanced manufacturing. That's why this government's achievement in securing the commitment of £63 billion of private investment, 10% of which will help turbocharge Britain's AI capacity, is so important. And I would like to congratulate the hard work that my right honourable friends and honourable friends across government have undertaken to secure this historic investment. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Buckingham and Bletchley constituency offers so much more. Farmers and rural businesses from across North Buckinghamshire work tirelessly to feed our nation, using the latest methods to produce high-quality food while safeguarding our local environment, as I saw firsthand when I met the Edgecott and Winslow young farmers earlier this summer. And I'm committed to being their advocate in this House, ensuring that they receive the support and recognition that they deserve. Madam Deputy Speaker, if this House might indulge me for a few more moments, I want to close my maiden speech by thanking the people who believed in me and supported me on this journey to this place. First and foremost, I owe an unpayable debt to my mother, who brought me up alone in a council flat and sacrificed everything to help her son reach heights that neither of us could have dreamt of 33 years ago, be that city of London or the home of our democracy. And whose simple values of hard work and quiet perseverance taught me that everyone had value and deserves respect. Her example has been a guiding light to me, and for that I will be forever grateful. But there are so many others to whom I also owe so much, be that family members, my partner of 10 years, my friends of 15, 20, 30 years, all of which I mentioned to all my constituents that I myself generally only invest in the most long-term of relationships. And it is on this note, Madam Deputy Speaker, that I wish to address the young people in the towns, villages and city that comprise the Buckingham and Bletchley constituency. That regardless of who your parents are, where you come from or what you look like, never stop believing that if you work hard, anything in Britain is possible. And every moment that I am granted in this place will be working towards ensuring that you have the power to write your own life story and live the life that you have imagined for yourself on these islands of ours. And that is the Britain I believe in, and the one that I will be fighting for.
Excellent. Sean Woodcock to make his maiden speech.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to commend my honourable friend for Buckingham and Bletchley on his maiden speech. I'm not sure that when he and I attended a Birmingham University Labour students meeting back in 2009, either of us anticipated that we would be giving our maiden speech in the same session, and it was a very powerful one too. Through you, Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to start by saying what an honour it is to stand here as the Member of Parliament for Banbury. As a Banbury lad who has never sought to represent anywhere else, I want to repeat what I told residents on the doorstep during the campaign. This is the job that I've always wanted. To everyone who helped make that happen, I can only say thank you. To those residents, I also want you to know that now I have this job, I promise you that I will work hard every day to deliver for you, whether you voted for me or not. Furthermore, Madam Deputy Speaker, what makes this an even prouder moment for me is that I stand here as the first Labour Member of Parliament for the Banbury constituency. The constituency had, until the 5th of July, remained in the hands of one party for 102 years. But change is something that Banbury, which is actually the largest town in Oxfordshire, has got used to over recent years. For those who don't know, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Banbury constituency is at the furthest point north in the South East region and encompasses not just the town of Banbury, but the towns of Chipping Norton and Charbury, as well as countless villages and rolling countryside. And it is a beautiful part of the world to live in and to represent. Banbury is most famous for our nursery rhyme, ride a cock horse to Banbury Cross, to see a fine lady upon a white horse, with rings on her fingers and bells on her toes, she shall have music wherever she goes. known across the English-speaking world. But Banbury's history is more than that, and it is indeed more than just the town itself. The constituency reflects our country's history. Indeed, it is in many ways sometimes in the foundations and landscape of the constituency, from the Neolithic and Bronze Age Rollright stones to the settlement on the edge of Chipping Norton left to us by the Romans. There was the Norman Castle mound at Deddington. There was Broughton Castle, which, as well as being a stunning late medieval stately home, is likely to be recognisable by many of you as the setting for TV's Wolf Hall and the film Shakespeare in Love and Three Men and a Little Lady. I was once told that one of the only requests to film in it that the owners declined was when the studio wanted to paint it pink. That was probably wise. In the village of Roxton, where I myself went to school, we have the former home of Lord North, where he's also buried, giving us something that not all constituencies have, the resting place of a former Prime Minister. Bliss Mill, Toale's Boatyard and the Oxford Canal are all remnants of the area's growth during the Industrial Revolution. But the most colourful time in our history is undoubtedly the Civil War, when Banbury itself was on the side of the Roundheads, despite its castle right in the middle being on the side of the Cavaliers. The people of Banbury were so unmistakably Puritan that a poem was written about it and said, "To Banbury came I, O profane one, where I saw a Puritan one, hanging his cat on Monday for killing a mouse on Sunday." More happily, the Puritans is the nickname for the only supporter-owned football club in Oxfordshire, Banbury United. Madam Deputy Speaker, I mention all of this not just because I'm really proud of what I call home and its role in our past, but because I want the House to understand what the Banbury constituency is all about. While not changing hands politically between 1922 and 2024, change did come to Banbury in a big way. Old industries like making cloth in Chipping Norton or aluminium in Banbury went, while new ones such as logistics with companies like DHL, TW Haulage, food processing with Fine Lady Bakery and Go Fresh, and high-end mechanical engineering with the Haas Formula One team and ProDrive, they came instead. Others, such as brewing, moved within the constituency. So while you can no longer get a pint in a Hunt Edmonds pub, Hooky beer from Hook Norton is on sale across the United Kingdom. The building of the M40 in many ways permanently changed Banbury from a small semi-industrial market town into something completely different. Thousands of new homes have gone up as our area has become increasingly attractive for commuters to Oxford and London. But we still have a council waiting list that has quadrupled in a decade and a private sector that cannot meet the need. Meanwhile, vital infrastructure like schools, roads, health services have failed to meet the demands, posing fair questions from the community of those, like me, who support this government's ambitious house-building agenda. Yeah. For while they have changed, Banbury, Chipping Norton, Charlbury and the villages of North and West Oxfordshire have not lost their sense of community. The community has united across political divides and none in defence of our local Horton General Hospital when faced with downgrading, successfully fighting it off in 2008 and less successfully in 2016. As the use of food banks grew in the years after 2010, people across the area came together to help them to support those who are in need. For example, the Chippy Larder in Chipping Norton has become a much-loved community resource. Food security in Banbury cannot be considered without mentioning our rural communities, and perhaps the most famous farm in the country, Clarkson Farm. For all the entertainment that the series has provided, for me the most important aspect of it is the light that it shines on the huge challenges faced by our farmers, not just in the Banbury constituency, but throughout the UK. And I hope that this government's programme to support them will relieve many of the burdens that have made farming so challenging for so long. Yeah. There is South Hill Solar Farm on the edge of the Witchford Forest near Charlbury, which provides community-owned power to 1,200 homes. It's another reason why I'm so passionate about this government's exciting agenda on renewable energy. Then there is the volunteer driver service in Banbury itself, taking the elderly or those less able to hospital for nominal rates and to GP appointments as well. Throughout the pandemic, as in other places, people across Banbury worked hard to help those less fortunate during that most testing of times. and Banbury's community, led by some of its many thousands of Polish citizens, got together again to gather supplies to support for the Ukrainian civilians fleeing that conflict, while welcoming others into their homes and into their community. And it's on that note that I'd like to pay tribute to my predecessor, Victoria Prentice. While there was much in the campaign that we disagreed on, this side of the House was united with the party opposite in support of Ukraine. And I want to pay tribute to Victoria's decency and her clear compassion for humanity, as exemplified in her taking a Ukrainian refugee into her home, as much as for her 9 years' service to the community. For myself, I stand here in support of this government and its mandate for change, something which Banbury has a history of embracing. But before I finish, I want to thank my family for their support, in particular my wife, who, despite having multiple sclerosis, remains the strongest, most steady and most stable woman that I've ever met. Madam Deputy Speaker, I stand here as one Banbury born and bred, ready to build a better Britain and a better Banbury, and I'm determined to do it.
Claire Hughes to make a maiden speech.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I am very grateful for the opportunity to stand before you and make my maiden speech today, and can I congratulate my friends for Ossendon, Denby Dale, Congleton, Buckingham and Bletchley and Banbury on their excellent contributions today. Congratulations to you all. It is the honour of my life to have been elected as the Member of Parliament for Bangor Aberconwy, and I would like to offer my heartfelt thanks to everyone who has supported me in my journey to this place. To my partner, my 2 kids, who I won't name, because my entry in the world of politics has already caused them enough embarrassment as it is. To my brother Mike, my sister Pam, my nieces and nephews, and all of my friends back home. And my dad, who is watching from the gallery today, something that would never have been possible were it not for the incredible staff at Ysbyty Gwynedd who've saved his life on more than one occasion. I want to pay thanks also to my incredible campaign team, to my agent, Jim Hoey, to Ken Stevens, and I would also like to pay tribute to the late councillor Bill Chapman, who's very sorely missed. And without his encouragement much earlier in my career, I would not have been here today. Now, Bangor Aberconwy encompasses former constituencies of Aberconwy, as well as parts of what was Arfon and Clwyd West. I would like to thank all 3 of my predecessors and their staff for all of their work and the support of local residents. Robin Miller served as a member of Aberconwy from 2019. I know that his work supporting hoteliers during the pandemic was very much appreciated. David Jones served as a member of Parliament for Clwyd West and also served as the role of Secretary of State for Wales during his time here. Howell Williams served as a member of Parliament for Arfon and the previous Carnarvon constituencies for over 23 years, a member who was and still is very well respected by the communities that he served. I would also like to pay a special tribute to Betty Williams, who served as the Labour MP for Conwy from 1997 to 2010. Betty is a real Labour legend who is still remembered with huge fondness locally, and if I can be half as good an MP as Betty was, then I will be doing okay. Now, I've listened to many maiden speeches and noted that there is hot competition for whose is the most beautiful in all the land. I'm sorry, but game on. Bangor Aberconwy includes the seaside resort of Llandudno, historic town of Conwy, Bessacoed, Bangor Pier, the Carnarvon Mountains, Dyffryn Valley, too many beautiful places to name. Though I must, of course, mention my hometown, Penmaenmawr, which is a favoured holiday destination of Prime Minister William Gladstone, and my adopted home of Llanfychan. Now, I've noticed too that it is customary to elaborate on one's political roots. Childhood memories have been dragged along to party meetings or folding leaflets at the kitchen table. And I'm afraid that wasn't me. Politics wasn't really discussed in our house. For our family, direct action meant going out with a bucket and torch to rescue frogs. Largely thanks to my mother, my formative years were spent bird watching, pond dipping, bat counting, and on long mountain walks. My mum knew the value of our natural world and how vital it is that we protect it. And I will make it my mission in this place to do so in her memory. Now, when I was 11, my mum's life changed. She enrolled in an access course, did A-levels, then graduated with a degree in botany. No mean feat with 3 young kids. The fact that she was able to access higher education is not only testament to the last Labour government, but to the grit and determination of working people in our community. To understand why is to learn the founding story of Bangor University. 140 years ago tomorrow, on October the 18th, 1884, Bangor University opened its doors to its first ever cohort of students. Bangor University, the first in North Wales, was not founded by rich benefactors or philanthropists, but quarrymen and farmers who believed in the transformative power of education. They set aside money from their wages every week because they knew then, as we know now, that education is the way to get on in life. Our story is one of resilience and of people who believe in supporting each other. All across Bangor Aberconwy, you will find incredible people who work hard day in, day out to support others in our community. People like Janie Black and the volunteers at Tea Happis, Ginny Rogers and the Friends of Mostyn Street, Brenda at Hope Restored, the wonderful women I met last week at Domani Befriending, Pobly Bobble, Maes Ni, Hwbogowen, our food banks, our churches, our mosques, our town, city and community councillors. There are too many to mention, but we all owe them all a huge debt of thanks. Diolch o galon I chi gyd. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am proud to be part of a Labour government which is firmly on the side of working people. I am proud to be part of a Labour government which is committed to breaking down the barriers to opportunity for young people growing up in communities like ours. And I am proud to be part of a Labour government that understands that tackling the climate and nature crises is not only the biggest challenge we face, but an opportunity for economic growth. The subject of today's debate is this week's record-breaking International Investment Summit. Now, before coming to this place, I spent my career working with startups and SMEs. I know how important economic and political stability is for business. And under this new government, Britain is truly the best place to do business. And there is huge potential in our corner of Wales ready to be unleashed. We have a proud industrial history, a wealth of talent in science and technology, wind, waves, mountain raiders. Everywhere you look, you will find ingenuity and innovation, communities full of pride, purpose and potential. To finish, I am proud of our past and I am excited for our future. Whether you live in Penamawr or Pwllglas, Bangor or Bontichel, Conwy or Cerrig-y-Drudion, I will fight tooth and nail to bring investment to our area while promoting our Welsh language and culture, to make sure our young people know that these opportunities exist and that these opportunities are for them. There is much to do and it won't happen overnight, but I hope to do every single one of my constituents proud. Diolch.
Yeah. Jessica Toale to make her maiden speech.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful for the opportunity to give my first speech in the House as the new Member of Parliament for Bournemouth West. Over the last few weeks, it has been an absolute pleasure to hear the excellent maiden speeches of honourable members from all sides of the House, including my colleagues from Ossett and Denby, Congleton, Buckingham and Bletchley, Banbury and Bangor Aberconwy. And I have to say, I've been absolutely blown away by the talent and dedication that all of these members have shown. It gives me lots of hope for the future, and I am honoured truly to be serving alongside them all. Madam Deputy Speaker, there's no coincidence that I chose to speak in the debate on the International Investment Summit today. While I was born in the UK, I grew up overseas, and I was always extremely proud to be British. Wherever I went in the world, people knew what we stood for. They were impressed with British leadership and excellence and expertise. Wherever I went, people knew about Britain's cultural contribution, from Harry Potter and Shakespeare to the Beatles and the Premier League. This foundation, and my parents' and my grandparents' encouragement to be curious about the world, to lend a helping hand wherever I could, took me into a career in overseas development, living, travelling and working in almost 100 countries. And not only do I have members of my family in the gallery today, but also family friends from the United States, where we lived for 8 years. This foundation meant that Bournemouth was always at the heart of my life. My family live there now. I have a very strong connection to the area, spending my summers there and getting that much-needed teenage freedom by being able to go to the beach with my friends, explore the town, explore the gardens, and sadly it's not something that parents feel that they can do anymore. Over the years, not only has the reputation of this country that I love so much suffered, people in Bournemouth's pride in their town has faded, and this is a real travesty. Don't get me wrong, I'm still very, very resolutely proud to be British. For the record, I drive a Mini and I have 2 English bulldogs. But this is what's catalysed me into this place and to stand up for the people of Bournemouth West. A real desire to rebuild the bonds of community and to reignite that pride that we all have in our towns and our country. Madam Deputy Speaker, I want to congratulate the Prime Minister, the Chancellor and the Business Secretary on the Investment Summit and all their teams as well. This was Britain at its best. Outward-looking, active, engaged on the world stage, being led by our values and by our mission, and for all the billions of investment that has come in, which I know will benefit all areas of the country. Yes.
I wonder whether she'd be tempted to tell us about her favourite pub in Bournemouth, or were there any bears around?
No bears, I'm afraid. I will get to that. But the Investment Summit, of course, Bournemouth is a town which will benefit massively from the innovation and investments that the Investment Summit brought in. And I know that my constituents will be keen to hear how our local businesses, our high street, and even their bills will benefit from the summit. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, I also want to take the opportunity to pay tribute to my predecessor, Sir Conor Burns. He served the constituency for 14 years, making it his home following his election in 2010. Now, as well as serving as a minister, Sir Conor was passionately dedicated to our local schools, bringing in investment for their improvement and improving opportunities for local young people, a tradition I'm keen to continue. Many of you will also know that Sir Conor was proudly devoted to the late Mrs. Thatcher, and in his own maiden speech stood in the same place that Mrs. Thatcher stood to give hers. So, perhaps the greatest tribute I can pay to him would be to continue that tradition in the same place here. And I wish him all the best of luck in his onward endeavours. While he and I may have differed very drastically in many of our views, we are here to provide a voice for the people of Bournemouth West in Parliament, and that is a role I will continue. And I want to put on record my thanks to the great people of Bournemouth West for giving me that opportunity to do so under a Labour government. Yeah. Madam Deputy Speaker, Bournemouth is not natural Labour territory. And I am really honoured to have won the trust of the people of Bournemouth to become not only its first Labour MP, but also its first female MP. Yeah. And that is a monumental sign of the real changes that we've seen in the constituency that are affecting it now and shaping its future. Yes, we are a beautiful seaside town with white sand beaches, picturesque parks. Our hotels, hospitality and cultural venues and English language schools have attracted people for generations to visit, but also seeking a better quality of life. But there is so much more. Bournemouth is a relatively new town, but parts of my constituency, like Kinton, were mentioned in the Doomsday Book. Scratch the surface just a little bit and you will find a growing and vibrant community of innovators and creatives. We have world-leading graphic effects and post-production companies. We have a vibrant community of small businesses and vibrant high streets in Winton and Westbourne, with businesses that are integrating sustainability and also community into their business models. We have a burgeoning tech sector with leadership in fintech, gaming and active travel. We have 2 world-leading universities and an excellent FE college, feeding that ecosystem and making sure our young people are equipped with the digital and the creative skills that they need to succeed in the 21st century. And I could go on. Of course, there are challenges. Like all seaside towns, we've seen our town centre decline. More than a decade of cuts to public services has meant that people now struggle to get an NHS dentist. Yeah. Crime, antisocial behaviour are at the forefront of people's minds. For me, those parents who won't let their daughters go into the town centre at night. Knife crime has destroyed lives. The housing market too often locks out young people and young families. And don't even get me started on sewage. But I feel hopeful about the future. And I feel hopeful because of the collective spirit that I see every day in my constituency. People like Fran and Jessie at the Henry Brown Centre and Kerry and her team at the Bourne Community Hub, who are working against the odds to build their communities and transform lives in neighbourhoods like West Howe and Alderney. For all the community groups and residents groups who are fighting hard to improve their local areas, campaigning to protect our ancient heathland and our precious coastline, and of course, all of the businesses who are giving it a go, getting into our high streets and town centre, breathing life back into empty shops and revitalising our heritage buildings. This is all really exciting stuff. And I know that with a new mission-led government, our town can and will be the safe and thriving hub it once was. I know that kids in West Howe can and will have the same opportunities that our young people in Talbot Woods do to get world-class education in their schools, colleges and universities. I want graduates who fall in love with Bournemouth to find great jobs and affordable housing so that they can stay and build their lives there. And I want all of our businesses to thrive in the vibrant ecosystems that we're now developing. Families in Wallisdown to get the support that they need in their schools and to not worry about getting a dentist or a doctor. All of our residents, regardless of age or income, should feel proud of their town and their local neighbourhoods. Yeah. 3 out of 4 people in my constituency at this general election voted for change. Now, they didn't all vote for me, but delivering that change is a responsibility I now embrace. I want to use it to build a better politics, a fairer future, where everyone feels like they have a stake. So, I'm very excited and looking forward to working with the brilliant people of Bournemouth West and our mission-led government to build this shared future and reignite this sense of hope, not only in our special seaside town, but across the whole country as well.
Yuan.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Bournemouth West, on her wonderful maiden speech just now. I know that her international background and deep expertise in international development will add much richness to our new Parliamentary Labour Party, and I also believe that an international background is essential to enriching the perspectives on our side of the House. In my previous life before coming to this place, I also spent 8 years interviewing leaders of international businesses, many of whom had long-standing commitments to investment in the UK, but who repeatedly told me and my former colleagues at the Financial Times that political instability was putting them off making future investments. And that's why I very much welcome our Minister on the International Investment Summit and also her remarks on the importance of the private sector's partnership with our government. The 10-year project that we have for national renewal, as well as our 10-year industrial strategy, shows our commitment to long-term economic ambition and planning. And I very much congratulate the organisers of the summit, which brought together over 300 industry leaders and secured over 60 billion pounds of investment, more than 6% of that raised last year. 6% more than that was raised last year, I must add, and that will create nearly 38,000 jobs, one of which jobs is bringing Elton John out of retirement. Unfortunately, private investment in the UK since the global financial crisis has been much less Rocket Man and more Tiny Dancer. Over the last decade and a half, Britain has experienced a much larger slowdown in the growth of capital intensity than other comparative countries such as the US, France and Germany. And it's this, alongside our skills growth, that accounts for our productivity puzzle. I very much welcome the appointment of John Van Reenen, with the wonderful LSE economist, to our Council of Economic Advisors. And Van Reenen has done important work on the issue of productivity in the UK. And he suggests that our post-financial crisis fall in productivity growth is primarily due to a large fall in capital accumulation. Now, in other words, British workers are being held back by the low levels of public and private investment. And that is what we need to unlock in our government to succeed in our growth mission. Stability is what we will provide, but stability alone is not enough. In the 21st century, we have to do more to provide industry and business leaders with the leadership that they require to navigate our increasingly complex geopolitical world in which there are fragmentations of supply chains across the world, as well as the green transition. And this means industrial strategy. I very much welcome the publication of our government's industrial strategy earlier this month, particularly the focus on life sciences as one of its key 8 sectors for investment. My constituency of Earley and Woodley in the Thames Valley is a prime location for foreign direct investment, particularly in life sciences. And I'm very much proud to say that the Thames Valley is the fastest growing region in the UK outside of London. I congratulate the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce, with whom I've worked already my first 100 days, on securing over the last decade over 1,000 instances of foreign direct investment. And I have to say that we can measure, I think, the excitement of business and of the private sector for our Labour government by the amount of engagement I've already had from businesses in my constituency and through the Thames Valley Chamber of Commerce. The biopharmaceuticals group Lonza, which is Swiss in origin, recently over the summer received a 30 million grant to expand and relocate to my constituency in the Thames Valley Park, which is one of 3 business parks in the area alongside the Thames Valley Science Park and Green Park. And I recently met with Bayer, the originally German company, who employ hundreds of people at their headquarters in my constituency and contribute to crucial health and life science research in the UK. Advancements in life sciences have fundamentally improved not just the economy and the innovation of the UK, but also the length and quality of life here and around the world. And that's why I welcome the Health Secretary's mission to make sure that the NHS receives these cutting-edge treatments that are being pioneered by companies in my constituency and beyond. And life science investment, if done correctly, can be a significant driver of growth and productivity as well, our central mission. So I look forward very much to meeting with the Minister for Industry to discuss next week how we can give full rein to our life sciences companies in our constituency and to the clinical research taking place in our Royal Berkshire Hospital, again at the forefront of much research in medical trials, and also a hospital that will benefit greatly from private and public investment. But businesses don't exist in isolation. What makes some countries prosper is the strength of their institutions. And I know that responsible and highly productive businesses wish to retain their skilled workforces. What those skilled workforces require is countries with well-functioning public service provision, with infrastructure, with accessible housing. These companies want political stability and a regulatory framework that works for business, work and consumer. And that's why Labour's pitch to business does not just end with the International Investment Summit, but continues with the legislation we are passing in this government, in bills such as the Employment Rights Bill next week. Providing the foundations for businesses to thrive means fixing the foundations of our economy and of our society, and that is what I'm proud to see our Labour government will do.
Yeah. And I call Kanishka Narayan to make his maiden speech.
Diolch yn fawr. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, for the privilege of offering my maiden contribution to this House. It is a long list of maiden speeches that I follow, and so I offer perhaps no novelty, but I will take the opportunity of offering familiarity. In this debate on the International Investment Summit, I come with having spent the last decade at the front line of investment, backing the inventors of artificial intelligence, data and wider software businesses across this country and the United States. And therefore, Madam Deputy Speaker, I know the cause with depth and personal experience. In particular, I know that no working-age person in this country has seen a startup go to the FTSE top 10. In the United States, 8 out of 10 have experienced it. In the last decade of innovation, Britons in this country and in the Vale of Glamorgan have been denied the opportunity of shaping their destiny. Decline no more, because I know from speaking to investors, including those of the summit, that they believe what I have known in this Labour government. Change is on the way and has begun. My role, Madam Deputy Speaker, has been to put the Vale of Glamorgan front and centre in that wave of change. But I start also in recognising the dual impact that change in this House always has. For every maiden contribution, there is a contribution that has been. In my case, I want to recognise the contribution of my predecessor, the Right Honourable Alan Kent, Vale of Glamorgan Conservative MP for 14 years. In those 14 years, Alan served our constituency with sincerity. In fact, he was so sincere in it that I remember knocking doors in Cadoxton and Barry with the best constituency Labour Party in the country, only to have my hopes dashed, by a lovely elderly lady who said, "I'm going to be voting for Alan, the best Labour MP this town has ever had." Madam Deputy Speaker, we all carry an inflated sense of our personal vote in this House beyond our political allegiances. But in that moment, I have to say, I felt and I saw one. So I congratulate Alan on his service. I wish him the best in the inevitable duality of change that we share. But I also commit to him some continuity. Continuity in the service that he and his predecessor, the Labour MP John Smith in the Vale, offered to the constituents of the Vale of Glamorgan. Continuity also because the cause of Barry's development that I know Alan initiated will echo for years to come as my top priority too. I offer continuity because, in fact, the Vale of Glamorgan stands out for its continuity. Continuity as the world's centre of education. Madam Deputy Speaker, it was in Lantern Major, in St Iltyd's Church, that the UK's first college was sited. Not only home to St Iltyd, but also host to St David in the early 6th century. And it was in Cowbridge in 1795 that one of the first Gorsedd of Bards was hosted by Iolo Morgannwg. Since then, a font of appreciation for Welsh language, Welsh literature, and Welsh poetry. Continuity not just in education, but in energy. Barry, the world's powerhouse, the largest coal exporting port in this country, and indeed the world, in 1913. In Aberthorpe, not just one of the most advanced power plants of its time, but also now the host of my and my constituents' future dreams of a centre of excellence in green energy. And alongside energy and education, continuity as the world's pinnacle of natural beauty, a title I will only share, perhaps, with my honourable friend from Bangor, Aberconwy, for our shared Welsh background. Madam Deputy Speaker, my honourable friends from Dorset and Devon might have the Jurassic Coast, but I have to confess that in the Heritage Coast in the Vale of Glamorgan, we have every bit of the beauty, every bit of the history, and perhaps, for being a better kept secret, a brighter future too. Finally, continuity not just across education, energy and the beauty that we have, but in the heart and humour of the people of the Vale of Glamorgan. In Barry, the town that hosts Gavin and Stacey. And in particular, the heart and humour of Uncle Bryn, my favourite character, who's driving down the M4 blasting James Blunt songs, has been a personal inspiration to me each time I leave this esteemed chamber for the even more esteemed comfort of Barry Bados. The heart of the community spirit that I have seen across the Vale of Glamorgan. In Big Box Boyd, which is an initiative across schools, started in Barry, now beyond it, making sure that no child goes hungry when they're learning. The real struggle and the fight I see each week in the Vale Domestic Abuse Services in my constituency, fighting against the onslaught of violence against women that we have seen, not just in the Vale, but across this country. And the heart also, the powerful heart of the voice choirs of Barry, Lantern Major and Cowbridge, who are able to combine the pure heart of a Callum Lan with the deep optimism of the greatest showman in one night. And so I come here with news of the heart and humour of the Vale of Glamorgan, but I come also to report the honest challenges of it. The honest challenge of Barry, where delivering medicines as a volunteer, I learned that the pharmacist was issuing multiples of painkillers per patient compared to the same pharmacist in Cardiff. The honest challenge of our beautiful farmlands, where third and fourth generation farming families are fighting a great but difficult fight against the combined challenges of weather, disease and uncertainty. And the honest challenge of the veterans of the Vale of Glamorgan, who aren't seeking the world, but simply seeking a bit of public service for the exceptional national service they gave us. Madam Deputy Speaker, money doesn't buy most things in life. It doesn't solve most of our problems. But its absence, the deprivation entrenched over the last decade, is the root of many of us. And in particular, it is the cause that has chipped away at the dignity of my community. And that is why I come here with the twin ambitions of greater prosperity and of a deeper bond of dignity in the Vale of Glamorgan and across the UK. I do so not just out of political slogan or political theory, but out of a history of personal gratitude. Because it was 22 years ago, Madam Deputy Speaker, that the Vale of Glamorgan and South Wales, as well as Cardiff, offered a newly arrived set of parents the opportunity of a minimum wage and a night shift to subsidise the sleep of their young boys. In the absence of any holidays, it was Barry Island that first gave those two young boys the opportunity of relief, perhaps even some delight, over the weekend. And it was in South Wales, where I grew up with my brother, in the situation of particular economic stress, where you felt still, through the deepest privileges of education, you could go on to advise the Prime Minister in the civil service, to advise FTSE boards across the city, to invest in tomorrow's inventors, and ultimately to stand before you as Wales's first Member of Parliament from an ethnic minority background. When I stand for my twin ambitions of prosperity and dignity for the Vale, I will do so out of that personal history of gratitude. And for as long as I serve as the Vale's voice here in Westminster, I will fight each day for for those people of my community. Thank you.
Dean.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate all of my right honourable friends for their deeply eloquent and very moving maiden speeches this afternoon. It's a real pleasure to be in the chamber to hear them. And can I take this opportunity also to commend those on the front bench for a very successful, record-breaking investment summit earlier this week. The investment of £63 billion represents a real vote of confidence in this government's mission to grow our economy. I welcome, in particular, the announcement this week of a 5-year programme of investment at Stansted Airport, a major employer for our constituency in Hertford and Stortford. That programme totals £1.1 billion, including a £600 million investment in an extension to the airport's existing terminal. This investment in the east of England's largest single-site employer will not only provide an even better passenger experience, but help to connect our region's innovative sectors and creative industries with their international partners. Now, in Bishop Stortford, Stansted Airport is right on our doorstep, providing employment for around 1,500 residents in our town and surrounding areas. This contributes roughly £140 million in gross value added to our constituency. The terminal extension alone represents up to 5,000 additional on-site jobs, offering further employment opportunities for our residents, and strong rail and bus links to our constituency mean even more commuters will be able to take public transport to work. And on that point, can I also welcome the recent announcement from the Department for Transport that contactless payments will be rolled out on the Stansted Airport line in 2025. This will allow residents at Bishop Stortford and Sawbridgeworth stations to make use of tap-in, tap-out payments for the first time, an important step to improving rail travel for the many who rely on it in our constituency. Now, you may know this already, but I'll tell you more, because Stansted Airport is the only major airport in this country with a purpose-built, on-site technical skills college. Stansted Airport College offers vocational training opportunities to young people in our community and is delivering record number of apprentice students into employment in aviation, helping to fill urgent skills gaps in the sector with our local talent. Madam Deputy Speaker, under this government, I want Hertford and Stortford to be an even better place to live, work and learn. This investment promises to open new doors to new opportunities to gain skills for life and find meaningful work for our residents. It's also a clear signal that under this government, Britain is once again open for business, and I hugely welcome it.
Alan Gemmell.
Good day, Speaker, and might I join colleagues in congratulating so many excellent maiden speeches today, including my friend, the member for Bournemouth West. I was only sad not to hear about the names of her bulldogs and maybe even her mini. And my friends, the member for Buckingham and Bletchley and Bangor, Aberconwy, who gave such important mentions of their mums in their lives. I wanted to congratulate my right honourable friend on this record-breaking £63 billion of investment. It's a sign of the confidence in the British economy and in this Labour government, and more than double the amount committed at the last government summit, set to create nearly 38,000 jobs across the UK, including in Scotland with Green Volt, Europe's largest floating wind project, committing £2.5 billion to develop their North East Scotland site. And Iberdrola announcing that they are doubling their investment in the UK through Scottish Power from £12 billion to £24 billion over the next 4 years. As a former Trade Commissioner, I wanted also to thank my former colleagues in the business department and in markets like India for the incredible work they will have been doing to achieve this investment. I remember well the beavering away and the constant phone calls to major investors at moments like this. And having been at the last summit, I'm sure my own invite was lost in the post. I know from my time in India that international investors were already beginning to price in the benefits of a change in government. And I know those people do see that a Labour government is a source of stability, predictability, and that the UK is becoming a place for long-term safe investment. Yeah. That stability dividend that my right honourable friend has already spoken about. I would just say, though, that the £63 billion, while a record sum, is not enough for Scotland. We have seen significant investment in this first 100 days, but we would like to see even more come north of the border, and particularly to communities like mine in Ayrshire. My honourable friends, the members for Ayr, Carrick and Cumnock, Kilmarnock and Loudon and North Ayrshire and Arran are keen that increasing investment in Ayrshire is at the forefront of my right honourable friend's mind. Because for the first time in 10 years, we have 4 Ayrshire Labour MPs committed to growth and investment, and a Labour government that can deliver that. My honourable friends and I are working closely with the 3 local authority chief executives, the excellent principal of Ayrshire College, to develop that Invest in Ayrshire proposition. And we're looking at the opportunities for our region and our skills gaps. Because 14 years of the Tories and 17 of the SNP have let communities like Ayrshire down. Our towns were promised funding from the last Conservative government, and we, like other communities, promised that towns funding, are lobbying my honourable friend, the Minister for Democracy and Local Government, in our case to prioritise the towns of Irvine and Kilmarnock, but we know other honourable friends will be making similar cases. Because we do need to see a mix of public and private investment in our towns to deliver the change that our communities need. My right honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Scotland, is also working with us closely so that we can ensure the Ayrshire growth deal can meet the real current and future needs of the Ayrshire economy. It was clear to me in the thousands of conversations that I had during the election campaign that jobs, investment and growth will be the most significant change that this Labour government can bring to communities across Ayrshire. My right honourable friend, the Secretary for Business and Trade, visited Prestwick Airport during the election campaign, for which I'm very grateful. And he will remember that Prestwick is Scotland's aerospace hub, with 55% of Scotland's aerospace sector jobs. A sector which already attracts international investment, but one in which we want to do much, much more. Similarly, we are looking at GB Energy and this government to drive further green investment in Ayrshire. We want to see parts of that green energy supply chain come to Ayrshire. We have a positive story to tell about transforming our coalfields into clean power fields, and we're proud to host our fair share of wind farms, playing a significant role in making sure the government meets its commitments to doubling onshore wind energy in 2030. We've also seen investment in companies like XLCC, a subsea cable manufacturer, which has secured £87 million from the UK Infrastructure Bank to invest in the development of new subsea cable factories in the Scottish town of Hunterston. Hunterston was once home to nuclear power in Ayrshire, an industry now on the way out because of the failed policies of the SNP. Policies which have included a nuclear-free Scotland relying on English nuclear. And I note once again that the SNP are not in the chamber in an important debate about Scotland's economy. When Torness in Scotland stops generating, and if there is no replacement capacity built, then at times when there's low wind output, like Monday this week for example, the power generated in England will be needed to maintain supply in Scotland. And at those times it will be significantly based on nuclear energy. I was pleased that the last Labour leadership of North Ayrshire Council welcomed the opportunity to restart a conversation with the nuclear industry in Ayrshire, because the jobs and investment that that industry could bring would be significant. Irvine continues to be a major centre for glass manufacturing through Ardagh Glass. This is another industry which benefits from stability and predictability in policy making, and one which is looking to make significant investment in green transition. But in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, I hope that my right honourable friend will see there are significant opportunities for greater investment in Ayrshire, and ask her brilliant colleagues in the Office for Investment to place prioritising working with my colleagues and me to make that happen.
Tom Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to start just by noting the fact that we've got on our front bench 2 ministers who split across departments. You've got one minister who's at the Treasury in the Department of Work and Pensions, another who is at the Department of Energy Security and Net Zero and Business and Trade. And I think that just goes to show that we have joined up government, a mission-led government, which is trying to move away from working in silos but actually having shared ambition, and that is to be commended. We're also here today to talk about the investment. And investment is obviously about money, but it's also, and I would not want to lose this, it's about people. It's about skills, expertise, experience, opportunities for learning, better jobs, dignity at work. It's about feeding families. It's about enabling the maximum amount of prosperity. And we should hold on to that, because these are the things that our constituents want, And these are the things that our constituents send us to this place to deliver. That said, it's also about the money. And so when we do look at the money, when we look at that sum of 63 billion, it truly is a record-breaking amount that was secured. And I want to commend our mission-led government for achieving it. It is the clearest sign that global businesses are back in the British economy and working people under this new Labour government. Because this is money that could have gone elsewhere. It's money that is coming to our country for all the reasons I just described. It's money that's coming to our country because the country voted for change to achieve stability. We had, in the last 14 years, little to no growth, billions wasted in taxpayer money, a huge black hole in our finances, and a country left vulnerable to the worst cost of living crisis in a generation, where our government was forced to spend 94 billion on household support because we were so exposed to fossil fuels. And that's why I'm particularly pleased that within this investment, we have so much that's going towards clean energy. Take the 2 billion from Octopus Energy, some of which will be used to build 4 new solar farms across Bristol, Wiltshire, Essex and the East Riding of Yorkshire, powering up to 80,000 homes. These are investments which will improve our local economies and communities. I feel sad and wrong saying this, but we have been talking about Elton John, and so the inevitable pun would be to say this because nobody else has said it. Sorry seems to be the hardest word, and yet we aren't hearing that, either said in jest or in sincerity. And I would look at the opposition benches, which are frankly deserted, and wish that Conservatives could speak up on behalf of British business. I do apologise. I do apologise. Perhaps you'll find a hymn sheet to sing from, which is about being in favour of British business and investment, and maybe you will also say sorry, as much as it is the hardest word. Twice now. Neither this debate nor these investments are just about the money, as I was saying. Nearly 38,000 people across the UK, hopefully, including my home of Bournemouth East, will begin new jobs as part of the green transition that our country so desperately needs and our industrial sector has been crying out for. To this end, I also welcome the publishing of the government's Green Paper on its 10-year industrial strategy, of which we were hearing before very much. Already in the short time I've been a member of this Parliament, the government has committed to strengthening Britain's industrial base in both the service and manufacturing industries to create good, well-paid jobs in our green sectors that we have today, but also those in the future. And with the right policies, the government can supercharge investment in clean energy industries across the UK, from the industrial heartlands of the north to the thriving finance sector in Bournemouth. This is about more than just creating green jobs. It's about the revitalisation of entire regions and making sure that every corner of our country benefits. I've been fortunate this week to spend time with investors and businesses and working people at 3 events here in London, and the relief is palpable. Listening to investors talk about how they've been holding on to money, craving regulatory certainty, craving planning reform, craving the building of homes for their workers, craving an NHS that could fix the workers that they need at the workplace but who are at home and well because of mental health or musculoskeletal problems or worse. Craving certainty from this government that would unlock the barriers to growth so that when they make an investment, it strikes dividend not just for their companies but also for our wider economy. So when we hear that this was investment lined up before the general election, do not believe this. This is investment that came forward after the general election because they have a government now which is committed to putting in place the infrastructure and the changes needed for our economy to grow, and to grow now and to grow into the future. We know the benefits of action and we know the costs of inaction because we're bearing those costs now. And I believe that working together, government, investors, working people, our trade unions, businesses, we will achieve energy independence and security. We will achieve falling and lower bills. We will achieve good jobs and pride in our communities. And together with our mission-led government, we will achieve a growing and improving economy and way of life.
Yeah. And I call Shadow Minister Gareth Davies.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and thank you to all of those who have spoken in today's debate. It's right that I recognise the contributions that are made from across the House, but especially those who have made maiden speeches. We in this House all remember the moments leading up to and during the maiden speech, and it is still something that gives me chills to this day. And let me say to the member for Ossett and Denby in particular that I hope that her mother is enjoying the bright lights of London for the first time. I know that she will be very proud of her daughter. To the member for Congleton, I wish her well with her campaigning on parental leave, and she should know while she's not in her place that we all... Oh, you are. I apologise. You've moved. She's moved. We all regret the time away from our families, but it is for a life of purpose, and it is a worthwhile cause, as hard as it is. For the member for Buckingham and Bletchley, who I had the pleasure actually of meeting before he was a member of Parliament, as the Member of Parliament for Bletchley, I hope he can crack the code to the success of this place. To the Honourable Gentleman for Banbury, who gave an excellent speech, I know from what he has said he will be a great local champion for Banbury, and I appreciated the comments that he made about my former colleague and his predecessor. To the Honourable Lady for Bangor, Aberconwy, who will be busy in this job, no doubt, but I hope she will find time to still go frog searching. And finally, to the Honourable Gentleman for the Vale of Glamorgan, who gave an incredibly impressive and excellent speech, if I may say. Someone who went to one of our finest schools, studied PPE at Oxford, and later attended Stanford University in California, which, by the way, has quite an impressive alumni, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sure he has a very bright future in this place, though he should be prepared for many of his Labour colleagues to constantly suggest that he's desperate to return to California at the earliest opportunity. But can I say in all jest and genuinely, Madam Deputy Speaker, that from the outset it is right that we welcome, and we do welcome, that this government is building on the strong foundations for international investment in our country. As of July this year, a randomly picked date and month, the UK was Europe's leading country for new foreign direct investment projects for a third successive year, with the highest number of total projects in the last 5 years. And the most recent official figures show that the UK ranks second only to the United States for greenfield FDI overall, while leading the world in investment into our renewables sector. And this is one of the reasons why we have achieved the fastest decarbonisation of any developed country in the world, and we should be very proud of that. This isn't, of course, just down to those elected, but those who are officials, those who put in work day in, day out to support governments, the Office for Investment, the Treasury, Department for Business and Trade, and the Foreign Office, and our many trade commissioners who help drive our efforts to attract significant pools of investment capital from across the world. Now, this has been a good week for investment into our country, and I think it's important that this House, no, it really has, it's important in this House that we recognise the cross-party heritage of this summit this week, and I'm sure the Minister will acknowledge that when she stands up, where Labour have carried forward good ideas that we Conservatives either implemented or started in government. They deserve credit, and I am very happy to give it. For this was, in the end, a fine follow-up to the Global Investment Summit, which was pioneered this time last year. And our cross-party collaboration doesn't end there, Madam Deputy Speaker. In many cases, this Labour government has announced or re-announced investments which were negotiated and even agreed by its Conservative predecessor. I guess some things sound so good they're worth repeating. As my honourable friend, the member for Thirsk and Malton, who's made a timely entrance to this chamber to rapturous applause, has highlighted, over half of the investment which the government announced was actually announced before the general election. Right. Whether it's the $10 billion committed by Blackstone, which was already announced in April, or the $8 billion committed by Amazon, which was negotiated by my right honourable friend, the Shadow Chancellor. I could mention, for example, BW Group, which was announced in 2021, or Crystone, which was announced in 2022. But whatever the origin, more private investment clearly benefits the British people, contributing to more jobs, better productivity and stronger growth. I think we can all agree on that point, and it should not be taken for granted. And so I commend the speech by my honourable friend, relatively new member for Bromley and Biggin Hill, who highlighted the importance of not
being complacent about this point, and in particular ensuring that regulation remains low. And as I said at the beginning, for all the contributions, maiden or otherwise, to this debate, rightly recognising the importance of private investment in our economy. However, we do, I'm afraid, Madam Deputy Speaker, need to face the fact that this summit has been overshadowed by a rather large elephant in the room. As the Transport Secretary knows all too well, many investment decisions are provisional, depending on an economic environment which welcomes and supports investment. Since Labour have taken office, thanks to all the doom and gloom, made-up black holes and submission to the unions, business and consumer confidence have fallen, and the cost of borrowing for the British government has risen. We've had 100 days of self-contradiction and uncertainty. Even in just a few months, this Labour government has promised public investment while cutting capital expenditure, fretted over a supposed black hole while fritting away billions on pet projects and union paymasters, disavowed red tape while smothering small businesses in new regulations, and paid lip service to fiscal responsibility while laying the ground to fiddle the financial rules. Meanwhile, almost every single revenue-raising policy in the Labour manifesto has proven pretty much worthless, just like their promise not to raise national insurance. And the rest of us, Madam Deputy Speaker, were left wondering, and continue to be left wondering, if I make a successful investment, how much of the return will I be able to keep? If I take on a new employee, how much tax will I need to pay for the privilege? If I increase my workers' pay, what will the total cost be? If I save for the future, will the government help itself? And if I pass the business I built all my life onto the next generation, will they be penalised? Madam Deputy Speaker, if £1 billion is jeopardised by bad Labour commentary, then £63 billion can be jeopardised by bad Labour policy. Investment and economic growth are not simply convened. They take concerted effort, not contorted fiscal signals. So while some have questioned whether having the summit before the budget was putting the cart before the horse, my worry is that come budget day, the horse will have already bolted. And I wonder, in the event the budget backfires, will the Prime Minister be forced to disown or defenestrate yet another member of his top team to avoid taking responsibility for himself, sacrificing someone else on the altar of self-service? Madam Deputy Speaker, as has been said before, Labour's chaos might be in my party's interest, but it's not in the national interest. I want to see the promise of these investments fulfilled. They must not put these at risk. Let's build on the success of our country's economy and push businesses up who want to succeed, not pull them down when they do succeed. I'm afraid as long as this chaos, scandal and uncertainty continues, I won't hold my breath.
Minister Sarah Jones.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. You were doing so well. He was doing so well in the first half of his comments, and then he returned to the same old tired lines that got them defeated in the last general election. Madam Deputy Speaker, I am so pleased to be closing this debate today, which in a parliamentary context draws to a close a hugely positive and successful week for the United Kingdom. I want to thank all those honourable members who have contributed to the debate. I would say I am disappointed that only one Conservative MP managed to make it here to speak in the chamber. Nobody from the SNP managed to come. I am surprised that they're not here to welcome the week that we have had so far. The Prime Minister made this government's guiding mission clear from day one. We will go for growth at every opportunity, and we are doing that in spades, Mr. Speaker. A week ago today, we launched our landmark employment rights bill to create more secure employment and a happier and productive workforce. On Monday, we launched our Industrial Strategy Green Paper, something business has been crying out for, which lays strong foundations for 10 years of growth and investment in our most important sectors. Also on Monday, the Prime Minister hosted some of the world's biggest investors to show them why, under this growth-driven government, UK PLC will be a blue-chip company that they should invest in. And as we have mentioned this afternoon, Elton John was there to speak. And I should tell the House that he took no fee for this. He took no fee. He wanted to come and celebrate with us the commitment that we have seen from our companies across the world coming to the UK. I want to pay tribute, before I talk a bit more about the Investment Summit, to those members who spoke today, particularly in their maiden speeches. The member for Ossett, well, I should start by saying, as someone who wells up quite often and quite easily, this was a difficult debate for me. There were many moments where we were looking up and seeing parents and family members, and I saw tears being wiped from family members in the gallery, and it was lovely to see. The member for Ossett and Denby, I loved her motto of working hard and talking straight, and I think that's a great motto for this new government. The member for Congleton gave a wonderful tale of her constituency and its people, including a slightly odd story, I have to say, about Bear Town, but there we go, that's Congleton. The member for Buckingham and Bletchley gave a great speech telling us about the importance of Bletchley Park and the influence it's had not just in World War II but also in our technical age we're in today, and talking about the advanced manufacturing in his own constituency. The member for Banbury, who is a Labour student. There are many, I don't know how many members of the Cabinet are Labour students, but it's quite a good place to, I wasn't a Labour student, but it's quite a good stomping ground for future Cabinet members, I think. A wonderful homage as well to the people and place of Banbury in that speech. The member for Banbury Aberconwy, Diolch, incredibly beautiful speech talking about your constituency and its proud industrial history and the ingenuity and innovation that it still shows. The member for Bournemouth West with no notes. Moved. People keep moving around. Really impressive speech, and the passion with which she wants to reignite pride in her town and in our country was very well understood. The member for Earley and Woodley, who has incredible experience, not least working at the FT, who talked about the life sciences in her constituency and how important they are, and I look forward to meeting her next week to talk about it more. And then the member from the Vale of Glamorgan, who had again with no notes, lovely words about his predecessor and a lovely story of the history and beauty of his constituency, and a tribute indeed to his constituents. I think many of us have spent many happy days in Barry Island, and I certainly have. So the Investment Summit saw £63 billion of investments announced, which is more than double that was raised at the Opposition's summit last year. It includes Iberdrola doubling their wind energy investment in the UK from £12 billion to £24 billion. 10.5 billion from Orsted and Greenvolt, and over 200 million from Sia Wind. 8 billion for carbon capture that will create 4,000 jobs and support 50,000. 2 billion from Octopus Energy and 1.3 billion from Macquarie for solar projects. 6 billion of new money for data centres on top of 10 billion recently committed by Blackstone and 8 billion from Amazon. 1 billion for DP World's London Gateway and 200 million for a new freight ferry terminal at the port of Immingham. Over 300 million for Holtec's advanced engineering plant in South Yorkshire, 500 million from BMW Group for battery energy storage, over 2 billion for rail and air projects from Network Rail, 400 million for life sciences and healthcare innovation, and our fantastic Imperial College London will also put 150 million into a new R&D campus. And on top of these transformational investments, we proved our credentials as a pro-business government. Thanks to the Chancellor's announcement to turn the UK Infrastructure Bank into the National Wealth Fund, we're catalysing tens of billions of pounds of private investment into the UK's clean energy and growth industries, including green hydrogen, carbon capture and gigafactories. We are establishing an Industrial Strategy Advisory Council led by Claire Barclay to help deliver the pro-business environment that our industrial strategy will depend on. We're creating a British growth fund that will fuse pension investments and venture capital markets. We're expanding the Office for Investment to ensure that international investors get the information and guidance they need to invest in Britain, and we are cutting red tape to remove redundant reporting requirements while making it easier for companies to re-domicile themselves in the UK. And all this within 100 days of taking office. From more rights for a more productive workforce to a pioneering industrial strategy for our sectors of the future to scores of investments worth tens of billions of pounds, this government is delivering change. The previous government's scattergun approach to growth left our country starved of investment, economically divided and struggling to maintain our competitive edge in the global economy. Growth was anemic, wage growth flatlined on their watch, productivity was down. The gap between France, Germany and the US doubled since 2008. We saw the lowest investment share as a percentage of GDP in the G7. We ranked 27th out of 30 in the OECD last year. And this is on top of the state of the public finances that the party opposite left us with, public services starved of investment, millions of days' work lost to strike action and rocketing debt. But in just 100 days, this government has already laid down the blueprint for 10 years of growth through our biggest and most innovative sectors, secured 63 billion in new investments that underline our potential as a world leader in renewable energy, life sciences, technology, clean growth, and brought forward a raft of reforms to create a happier, secure and more productive workforce. I will happily give way.
I'm very grateful to the Minister for giving way. She's making a very interesting and important speech and has set out exactly what this government's doing to benefit my constituents in Newcastle and Lyme. But I wonder whether she could find some time to meet with me so we can discuss how together we can ensure the people of Newcastle, Lyme and Staffordshire more widely can benefit from the investment secured at the summit this week.
Thank my honourable friend for his question. I'm always very happy to meet and talk about what more we can do in the next 100 days and indeed the next 5 to 10 years in government, we hope. To those honourable members opposite who have questioned whether some of these investments were teed up under the last government, they know perfectly well that business confidence can rapidly change investment decisions. Each of the announcements included are new firm commitments being made by companies to invest in the UK, where either final investment decisions have been taken or announcements have been accelerated or unlocked because of actions taken and support provided by this government. I'm sure the members opposite will have seen the letter in the Times at the start of the week from 5 of the world's biggest banks, joined by private equity firms, insurers and tech giants, who say it is time to invest in Britain. They say that Britain's greater stability has increased its attractiveness to investment, which is a reference, of course, to Labour's decisions on taking office. We are optimistic, they say, about the future of the economy, and we believe it's time to invest in Britain. The fact that we had scores of investors attending our summit on Monday with tens of billions of pounds being firmly committed to new projects shows that under this Labour government, business and investors do have a great deal of confidence in our growth mission. I will give way.
I'm very good. To talk to confidence, would she explain, therefore, if confidence is rising, why the Institute of Directors have stated that confidence has gone from plus 30 in June to minus 7 today?
The Shadow Minister knows that we are working very closely with businesses, business organisations and others to make sure that what the changes that we bring in grow our economy. We have huge confidence from a raft of people, and for every quote the honourable gentleman can find, I can find him 10 that say the opposite. He can pick on one if he wants to, but £63 billion doesn't lie, I would suggest.
Put that in your pipe.
And let's not forget, Madam Deputy Speaker, that our summit on Monday was organised in a matter of weeks. The party opposite had 2 years between their investment summits, yet we secured double the amount of investment compared to their summit last year. Just to comment on a couple of points that were raised in other speeches, just to the Lib Dem spokesperson, importantly, business rates she's right to raise, and of course we are looking at that and made commitments to do so in our manifesto, and we'll deliver on those commitments. She's also right to raise skills, which is a huge challenge for us. We see huge opportunities for growth across the entire country. We have to make sure we have the skills landscape, which is why we're setting up Skills England. And she also wanted to talk about the National Wealth Fund and its ability
to crowd in funding into the green sector and green technologies, and it absolutely will do so. And so to summarise, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is clear unanimity, thank you to my colleague to my left. We are united across this House in the belief that Britain needs to facilitate growth. Let's face it, we've been severely starved of it. And only through growth can we keep taxes lower for working people, invest in our public services and create secure, well-paid, high-skilled jobs. But of course, this is against a backdrop of the poor economic inheritance left by the party opposite, one which lurched repeatedly from Prime Minister to Prime Minister, which gave us 7 growth plans in 14 years, which made millions of people pay the price of Trussonomics budgets, and one which saddled the people of Britain with a low growth, low productivity, low investment economy. And the steps this Labour government has taken in just 100 days shows that we are overturning their legacy of inaction, stagnation and deterioration, and creating a country of stability, innovation and prosperity. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered the International Investment Summit. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it.